Hello everyone, welcome to my session 6 teaching memo. The course is now half over. We just completed session 6. As you all probably know, or if you even care, March Madness is underway. The UConn women scored 94 points and a half against St. Francis. I hope none of you went to St. Francis. The course is now half over, as I said. I will probably start watching the tournament in a week or so. So far, lots of upsets. Spring training is in full swing. We will see if Aaron Judge was just a flash in the pan. So far, he's having a terrible spring training. St. Patrick's Day has come and gone. A great day for those Irish who imbibe. To me, it's just a day to have corned beef and cabbage and wear my Kiss Me, I'm a Memo t-shirt, which I just happen to have a picture of me on Facebook wearing it. And that is my idea of enjoying St. Patrick's Day, with ice cream and my Memo t-shirt. I'm also involved in the Heart Walk this weekend. There is a picture of my family. This is the first year I did the Heart Walk. I had all my family come. After that first year, just me and Dr. Laura. And last year, my stepdaughter Sophie, who's a teacher in the Bronx, came too, and that's her right there. But I have been the leading fundraiser for the past 3 years, and I am again this year. So hopefully I will be by Saturday. But that is what I will be doing this weekend, walking in the Heart Walk. I'm very obliged to the American Heart Association. It's because of their efforts. There was an AED, a defibrillator, in Gold's Gym where I went down when I had my heart event, which was almost exactly 6 years ago this week. It was on Good Friday in 2012. I'm not sure what day exactly it was because that moves around. So that's why I am very anxious and enthusiastic about raising money for the American Heart Association. Okay, let's do some housekeeping. There's not much housekeeping to mention this week. Many of you are going deeper into discussions by finding, quote unquote, relevant web links and articles to share. That's good stuff. I ask you to make the links live, however, by highlighting and then clicking on the link icon. I've explained this before. Cutting and pasting the link into the URL box and then clicking the drop down arrow and selecting the open in a new window. You can even type in below that exactly what the name of your web link is, but you don't have to. So make your web links live so we don't have to cut and paste them into the browser, although that's not a big deal, but I just like to click on it. I've had to make some major decision in session 8, which is coming up next session. Performance assessment. That was a new unit I added this semester, as I mentioned before, along with observation, and it forced the SR Select Response Test creation activity ahead a week. And as I looked it over this morning, I realized it was just too much work to be giving you all in one session. Even though the next session lasts for 2 weeks, it's still too much. So I may come up with a quiz as a form of assessment for that performance assessment unit, and I would place it in session 9. But right now that's all tentative. So, but don't be surprised if you do see a quiz pop up in session 9. The Hard as the Dickens discussion board has closed, and it always makes me a little sad because this gets my students to really examine the pros and cons of large-scale tests. It also ferrets out the differences between norm and criterion reference tests, and some of you still are confused about that because you talked about standardized tests in general, and that some are, and these are based on a norm, and criterion referenced aren't based on a norm or a population that's already taken the exam. And some people rail against the SAT and the GRE, and in most cases, rightfully so. Many people, they are created much like the old IQ test, just to sort and separate people. They are created to get a normal curve. So no matter how hard people work, it's all going to fall into a normal curve. People like college admissions officers like to use them because it's easy. Oh, I can just skim these people off the bottom and just worry about these people up here. The good news is that many colleges are making these tests optional now. And also research suggests that they only account for about 25% of student success, and that's only in the first year of college. The rest has to do with your grades, attendance, etc., etc. Our state assessments, on the other hand, are criterion referenced and they're based on standards. Theoretically, everyone could get all the questions correct. They are not made to create a spread, only to distinguish between those who know the material and those who don't. The controversy is regarding how the state creates the cut points for each level. And those are done after the results are compiled. So that bothers me a little because it's almost like, okay, we got to have so many 3s, 2s, 1s, and 4s, and I'm not really that familiar with how they go about doing that. If there is a certain criteria for that, there must be, but I'm not familiar with it. So several of you read my article. It was the first one I ever had published about how standard is standardized testing. In it, I described the efforts of my friend, who is now my wife, Dr. Laura, and her efforts to accommodate her testing situation to her learning style during her GRE or after she took it the first time. The point I was trying to make is how far we must take standardization, make sure everyone takes the test the same way. A few of you commented that teacher-made tests are better than large-scale tests because teachers can design their tests based on their students' abilities and learning styles, and this is a misconception. You should be designing your test based on your learning targets, not based on what you think your students know after you teach the lesson. You will be doing them a disservice, and they will never be able to answer the three big questions: where am I going? Where am I now? How can I close the gap? Laura in my 640.22 section stated what I consider to be another misconception held by many teachers of students from poverty. She claimed that a 5th grade student from Brooklyn struggled with a math question about a farm, and it used the unit of measure acre. She felt this was unfair because how could students know what an acre was if they came from the city or they lived in poverty? It is not. If all of you who read the bias chapter, there's only 2 ways: offensiveness and unfair penalization, and it's not unfair penalization if the only reason is that a student may not have been exposed to certain content. If we use that rationalization, then we would exempt all inner city kids from the global studies exam, 10th grade global studies exams, because geez, they're from the city. How would they know what the Taj Mahal is? So you get my point. Just because they don't know what a caboose is, that used to be the old one. Oh, the question said, do you know where the caboose is on a train? My kid doesn't know what a caboose is. They live in the city. And the thing is, because you live in the city doesn't mean you don't read, doesn't mean you don't learn, doesn't mean you don't expand your knowledge of the world. So that is not a reason a test is biased. So you need to hold on to that, because that's an argument many teachers use, especially New York City teachers or large city teachers. In my 640.20 section, Brianna made a statement that her teachers used to dread giving her class the state assessments, and this may or may not have led to her distaste for taking the SATs, what some would call a really big high stakes test. I caution all of you to become aware of all of your different quirks, your dislike for math, your dislike for state tests, your dislike for Donald Trump. Joking, just joking. so you don't pass these along to your students. One of the biggest reasons that kids suffer from test anxiety is the pressure put on them through mindless practice testing by teachers and their own distaste for those tests. So don't do it. Don't pass that along. Many of you brought up the opt-out movement. Catherine shared an article from the Washington Post, 2017 article, warning us about the new company Questar, who took over the contract for our state assessments from Pearson. You remember Pearson, that company that had the pineapple in the hair question, that company that New York State got rid of. In the same article, the author mentioned that one of the steps the state has taken to appease parents, all these opt-out parents, is that tests are no longer timed, which, according to the article, no longer makes the test standardized, means they can't use it for comparisons, and I disagree. We make accommodations all the time for special needs kids, and we don't rule that out, even though that's meant to level the playing field. Well, in my opinion, that we can make minor accommodations for all kids based on their learning style preferences, especially their environmental learning style preferences, whether they like bright light, low light, a little bit of sound, sitting at a desk or sitting in a beanbag chair. I'm at a loss to understand how allowing students to complete an exam and therefore get a complete assessment because they have enough time, how the heck that affects standardization and how we can use those results. I don't know. If a student doesn't finish a test, how the heck do we know if they know all the material? Several of you also discussed how teachers could be involved in creating our state assessments. Now that Pearson is out of the picture for grades 3 through 8, I think they still are involved in our Regents exams. Questar, in partnership with State Ed, are now soliciting teachers, they started that last year, to become involved in all aspects of the test creation process, including item writing. So those of you who felt teachers should be more involved got your wish. So I have a link in my teaching memo if you are interested, and it's also in session 5, ancillary materials. There's a link to the New York State Ed teacher participation website, and some of you have shared that in the discussion board. Many of you interacted with my thinking question or my teaching memo post question. I tried to stimulate a reaction by saying that Wiggins blamed teachers for not designing higher order thinking questions. My wife, who is a school administrator, often sees her teachers struggle with asking higher order thinking questions in the classroom. I think Wiggins touched a nerve, or some egos. Several of you took offense that teachers might be part of the problem because they don't know how to create tests that require students to make inferences. In my responses to those people, I predicted that many of you will struggle with that very issue in making your own selected response tests. I am hoping you make my prediction wrong. I found this discussion board worthwhile. I hope you found it worthwhile because I certainly felt it was. A little bit about reliability, validity, and fairness. You have a quiz on reliability and validity this week. They are very important topics in the test creation triangle, as you can see from Cohen and Spencer's Chapter 5 and Popham's Chapter 5 and my videos. Reliability, simply stated, is consistency. Reliability equals consistency. So in your vocabulary words, that's all you have to put. Consistency of exam scores. Getting the same results every time. As Popham claims, teachers need not worry about their tests being reliable, and certainly no one is going to give their students the same test twice just to see if it has test-retest reliability. However, you should be aware of all the things that can make a test unreliable, and you'll encounter some of those in this session's reading about the way you word your questions and other things. As Chrissy mentioned, when she asked her preschool students What did you learn today? So after getting answers that didn't really help her understand, she rephrased her question to her preschool kids. What is something you know today that you didn't know yesterday? She got a whole different group of responses, one that did help her understand. So keep that in mind when you begin to create your own questions on the EdTPA Elementary Education Manual, Assessment Manual. Be clear about wording your questions. Remember, if your test has validity, and I'm talking about content-related validity, that you needn't be concerned about reliability. Your test will be reliable. If your test correctly aligns with your learning targets, and there are enough questions for each of those learning targets that allow you to make valid inferences about what your students have mastered, then you have a good handle on content-related validity. That what I taught matches the standards or matches my learning targets. That's content-related validity. The other type of validity that you may encounter is predictive validity. Whether a test can accurately foretell how a student will do in the future. Now, most universal screening tests are tested for predictive validity. Can they predict how well a student does in kindergarten? Can they predict how well a student does in the first grade? Now, there are other tests like the SAT and the GREs that are supposed to predict how well a student does in college. But as you know, as I mentioned earlier, that the SAT does not predict how well a student does in college, only the first year, and it only counts for 25% of that person's success. So that's predictive validity. That's it for session 6. I will be back with my session 7 assignment video. Don't forget to click on that video that's in the assignments learning activities folder.